but I'm telling you, I've seen hundreds of people that I've told this advice to get jobs by spamming random people, asking for advice, ending up making relationships with some of them, and somehow that's led to them getting a job.
Welcome to Partnership Track. This is a podcast where I speak to partners at various law firms to learn about their journeys to becoming a partner. My guest today is Brian Potts. Brian is a partner at Husch Blackwell, where he works in commercial litigation. Alongside that, he is a serial entrepreneur. He invented the first and only computer keyboard specifically designed for lawyers. He is a writer who has published articles in various law journals and is the author of the Jobless Lawyer's Handbook. Brian is passionate about mentoring, and due to this passion, he founded the Legal Mentor Network. This is a non-profit dedicated to connecting law students and recently barred attorneys with legal mentors. Welcome to the podcast, Brian.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yes, thank you for coming on the podcast. And just going through all your accomplishments, it's made me really inspired. And it's also made me really curious about your background and, why you decided to go into law in the first place. So I currently live in England, and I know that the process of becoming a lawyer in America is a bit different. You have to first do an undergraduate degree in a completely different subject, and then you go to law school. So I just wanted to know what initially attracted you to a career in law in the first place, because I see that you studied economics before then going to law school. So what is it that made you attracted to law?
Well, you're gonna laugh probably. My brain was probably still growing at the time I made this decision when I was 22, but basically I went to law school because I ran out of college and didn't want to work. And so I didn't have a lot of options other than maybe getting a master's in economics, which I looked at, and then a law degree. And obviously, I picked law. And I think I have probably had definitely one of the most unique pathways to being a partner in big law. So I'm not the normal pathway person, which was, go to an Ivy League school and go to New York and work in big law. I've had to claw my way up. And frankly, that whole process is what has led to the Legal Mentor Network and other amazing things. So uh, it's it's been a wild ride, but it's been a lot of fun.
So you decided then that you wanted to go into law school. And so I'm curious because when you go to law school, you can go through different pathways. You can either work for the government. What made you attracted to going specifically into commercial law and working in like a city law firm?
Yeah, so I started out actually, I went to law school in the United States called Vermont Law School, which was known for environmental law. And so when I was studying economics, I was interested in environmental economics. And so I ended up going to Vermont to be an environmental lawyer. And I did actually and still do environmental law. But my practice has over the years also grown into energy, doing energy work, and that has led to me doing a lot of commercial litigation as well. So, but I think what's most unique about my pathway is that as a second year law student, so in the US, we have 3 years of law school, and as a second year, your sort of summer after your second year is the critical summer for getting a job in the US legal market. And so my second year, back in 2002, I had done pretty well in law school, and I thought, okay, I'm going to go get a firm job, ideally at a big law firm. And I applied to every one of the AmLaw 100 law firms. And I had good grades, top 10 or 15%. I'd done some interesting things. I assumed I would at least get an interview, and I didn't. I got form rejection letters from all 100 law firms, and I kept those and ended up 18 or 17 years later posting one on LinkedIn when I was at the firm where I'd gotten the rejection letter as a summer associate, I was now an equity partner at that firm. And it sort of took on a life of its own on LinkedIn and has led to the Legal Mentor Network. So my pathway was not unique. There are a lot of people who have been rejected multiple times from big law firms and then gotten in, but I'm certainly not the norm.
Yeah, and I came across the post on LinkedIn you were talking about, and I remember when I came across that post, I was also facing rejections from law firms as well. And for those who haven't seen the post, it basically reads, if at law students, if at first you don't succeed, try again. And accompanied with the post is a framed picture of a rejection letter from the law firm that you eventually became an equity partner at. So yeah, it's really inspiring to see that. And I'm just curious, like, how did you go from setbacks, like facing countless rejections from law firms, to then succeeding and then getting your first role at a law firm?
Yeah, so it's all about who you know. And I was from Kentucky originally. So again, I had already applied at all the AmLaw 100 firms and gotten rejected. And so I was like, well, I'll apply to some firms in Kentucky that aren't AmLaw 100 firms. And I got an interview or two, and I ended up landing a position partly because I mean, partly mostly it's hard to know, but because I knew someone at the firm and had a tie to that firm. And so I got hired at a firm called Greenbaum, Dahl and McDonald as in Lexington, Kentucky, as an associate. And so that's where I went and worked. And after about a year, my now wife and I decided that we didn't want to live in Lexington, Kentucky. Um, and so I went and got an LLM at Berkeley, and then again applied to a whole bunch of AmLaw 100 firms, this time in Chicago and Madison. Got form rejection letters from all of them but one. Interviewed at that one, but it was in Chicago, and decided we wanted to be in Madison. I'd been rejected by the one in Madison. At the time, there was only one AmLaw 100 firm in Madison. It's called Foley and Lardner. Now there's a couple, but uh, so basically, I got a job at another mid-sized law firm in Madison. It's a large firm, 350 lawyers, called Michael Best, but not an AmLaw 100 firm. And then as a third year associate, I'm plugging away in my office. And if you're a third year associate, you probably are, this is happening to you too. But I get calls from recruiters all day. And I happened to pick one up, and the recruiter said, I'm recruiting for an environmental associate position at an AmLaw 100 firm in Madison. And I was like, well, I know where that is because there's only one. And so I ended up interviewing at Foley and Lardner, getting an offer starting as a third year associate, so lateraled in, and then ended up making partner at Foley in the shortest time that was allowed back then. So I ended up making partner, I think I was 31 or
Wow.
32. And so luck, working hard, um, putting yourself out there, being okay with rejection, and just keep moving on is really how this happened. But so I made a partner at Foley, and I was an equity partner, and then I had a conflict issue with a client, so a group of us switched over to Perkins Coie, which was also in Madison, and I was a partner there for a few years before the fateful LinkedIn post that you're talking about, which actually 5 million people saw. And that one
Wow.
post led to the Legal Mentor Network, which is now a nationwide mentoring network in the US and actually Singapore and a couple other places, where law students get to meet practicing lawyers. And that all happened because I posted my rejection letter on LinkedIn, which is just crazy to say out loud. But what I've learned in life is lean into the things that are working, and don't worry if you get a lot of no's.
Mm. Yeah, and we'll get to the legal mentor network soon, but I just wanted to go back to the rejection part. So I'm currently like part of various group chats with aspiring lawyers, and I also usually hang around forums of aspiring lawyers. And uh, once in a while, I'll see a post by someone saying that they just want to give up because it's been taking so long to get a job at a law firm. And if this was any other career, they would have gotten one by now. Like, why is it so difficult? And for people who are going through that, like they apply to so many law firms and they're getting rejected on a daily basis, and even for like a couple of years, they're still not seeing any success. What advice would you give them to maybe stay motivated or to kind of reignite that passion they had for law in the first place? Because a lot of them are losing that passion because of the rejections. So, is there any advice you have to kind of stay motivated and reignite that passion?
Yeah, I have lots of advice. The first thing, and I tell this, I've literally met with 1,000 different mentees, people who just needed help, law students, young lawyers, and I do a one-on-one Zoom. I never say no to a meeting. And what I tell them is probably true in Europe, but I don't know for a fact. But the reason that it's so hard, at least in the US, to get a job right when you graduate is lawyers are essentially judged their entire career based on when they graduated from law school. And so all 35,000 people who graduate every year in the US from law school are your competitors for your career because lawyers are based on vintage. But when you graduate from law school, that is literally the only time in your entire career when all 35,000 people are looking for a job at the same time. 6 months, 12 months later, 70 to 80% of them have a job. And so the applicant pools are much, much smaller as you get further away from graduating from law school. And so, of course, that doesn't make it easy. I can't fix that problem. But what I
Yeah.
can tell you is that the first job is usually going to be a stepping stone job, not always. And the first job, really, the two things that are the most important are what does it look like on a resume to get you to wherever you want to be? And are the people nice? That's literally my two biggest things when you're a young lawyer. What is it going to look like on your resume? And will that help you get to wherever you want to go? And are the humans nice that you would work with? So sometimes, for example, people often are like, I really want to do employment law. And so they only look for employment law jobs right when they get out. And often they only look in the markets that are the most saturated. In the US, I say to pick 5 locations where you're willing to live for a year or two, not necessarily your whole life, and make sure 3 of those 5 locations are not New York, DC, LA, and Chicago. 70% of all US lawyers are trying to go to those 4 cities when they graduate. And so the pile of resumes is much bigger. It's much harder to cut through the noise. So thinking about what law schools are around the cities that you're applying to can make a big difference. But ultimately, again, at least in the US, 3 to 5 years out is the ideal window for getting the job that you actually want. And so if you think about it and back up from there, that doesn't mean you have to get the job you want right out of law school. It means you need to get some good experience so that in that 3 to 5 year window, you can go get the job you want.
Yes, that's definitely interesting. And I think in the UK, the same with London. Everyone wants to apply for jobs in law firms that are based in London. And so even certain law firms could get like 4,000 like applicants and they're only choosing 30 candidates. So it's very difficult to get one in London. And so maybe in a way that could apply to the UK would be to apply to those same firms, but their regional offices. So maybe their offices in
Exactly.
Manchester or Birmingham.
That's 100% accurate. And so the example I give in the United States is Florida. Florida has 12 law schools, and the highest ranked is University of Florida. So if you go to Georgetown or NYU or Columbia and you want to get a job at name the big firm, you're going to have a way bigger or better chance applying to that big firm's Miami office than you are applying to that big firm's New York office. But you know what? On your resume, nobody's going to care whether you were in Miami or New York. They're only going to care that you were at the big firm. And so using geography and your flexibility on geography early in your career can be very, very helpful in that. And you're looking at somebody who did it. we didn't want to go live in Lexington, Kentucky when I graduated from college or law school. Even though I like Kentucky, I'm from Louisville. So like if I was going to go to Kentucky, I would have picked Louisville, not Lexington. But I went to Lexington because it was a good firm. I needed a job. I put the good firm on my resume. I worked hard for a year. I got good reviews. I billed my hours requirements. And then I went and got an LLM in Berkeley to kind of reset, and then came to Madison. And so you just got to be strategic, especially at the beginning, because this is the hardest time, again, for you to get a job. And so you have to understand that you're going to get a lot of no's. You're going to have to just hustle. The other thing that I haven't seen the studies in Europe, but I bet money it's the same as the ones in the US. There's all kinds of studies out there that say basically 75% of the jobs that you are going to get in your life are going to come from people you know or have met, not randomly applying to stuff online. But almost everybody who's in law school and graduated, they focus only on the applying to stuff online because it's easy, and they don't know how to do the other 75%, or they don't even know about the other 75%. And so what you have is a whole bunch of recent graduates who have the hardest time, they're facing the hardest time getting a job, and they're only hitting the 25% of possibilities. And they're usually only doing that in the biggest cities that are the hardest to get a job. And so just being thoughtful and strategic and saying, okay, maybe I don't need to live in London for 2 years. Maybe I can go live in Manchester and hold my nose if I hate Manchester. Uh, and then, the sort of understanding that I don't need to be at the, Allen and Overy or whatever the top firm is in London right away. I need to be there, if that's where I want to be, 3 to 5 years after I graduate. And so smaller firms are fine at first. You're getting, experience. So, you know, being strategic, and the way to hit the 75% is, at least in the US, I recommend spamming. You know what spam is in Europe?
Yeah.
Not the salty ham in a can. I mean the emails that people don't want. Spam email the people who do what you want to do and ask for advice, not a job. Don't use the word job in any communication to anyone unless you're applying to an open job position. Advice, advice, advice. And what happens is you might have to email 100 lawyers to get one of them to meet with you, to give you advice, but that's fine. What happens is when you get on a Zoom with somebody, now they're a real person. Now you can make a relationship with them. And really the trick is that when people give you advice, they become vested in their advice working, because everyone wants their advice to work. Everyone is a narcissist at base. And so if you do 20 Zooms or Teams or whatever you like with lawyers in Manchester who do what you want to do and ask for advice about finding a job, what do you think's going to happen? Now 20 people in Manchester who do what you want to do are out on the street, and they want you to get a job because they want their advice to work. And so there's lots of methods you can use that are more networking focused and actually pretty time efficient. Now you don't necessarily need to go to some huge event with 300 lawyers and try to find the exact ones that might be useful. You can literally just spam email them and ask for advice. And you just keep doing this, and it might take 50 Zoom meetings or 100, but I'm telling you, I've seen hundreds of people that I've told this advice to get jobs by spamming random people, asking for advice, ending up making relationships with some of them, and somehow that's led to them getting a job.
Yeah, that's definitely good advice. And I think this is where like the legal mentor network like comes into play, because it's basically set up to connect recently barred lawyers, attorneys, and also aspiring attorneys to qualified attorneys. So can you talk more about, say, like how exactly does it work, and how specifically can the people that need it, how can they benefit from it?
Yeah, so the Legal Mentor Network, again, arose out of my post online, my LinkedIn post. And what happened is basically I started meeting with all these mentees and doing posts about them. And all these lawyers who were reading them online started volunteering to help me meet with people. And that has now led to this nationwide nonprofit called the Legal Mentor Network, where basically, if you go to legalmentornetwork.org, there's a sign in page or a get involved page, and you click a few buttons. You can log in using Google or LinkedIn, and it will have a form. You pick whether you want to be a mentor or a mentee, and you can do both if you want. And then you fill out a form about where you want to practice, what kind of law, and it tries to match you with one of our or two of our 750 people like me who are practicing attorneys who have agreed to meet with people for free. It's all free. There's no reason not to do it. 4,000 people are using it right now. We have some people in Europe, so there's not a ton. It's primarily focused on US law jobs, but we have a chapter in Singapore where we're basically happy as long as lawyers are meeting younger lawyers. So we're not super picky. Um, but it's a great program. They also have, if you go sign up to their LinkedIn page or you do sign up to the Get Involved page, we've been having live events across the US. So we had 24 events last year in 12 cities with, well over 1,000 people in attendance. So it's kind of growing. It's only a couple of years old. Hopefully at some point we'll have a European chapter. But for right now, it's still a useful tool, even if you're in Europe, to go on and see, because there's lawyers at every big company you can think of on there. Google, Amazon, Microsoft. There's big firm lawyers and small firm lawyers and government lawyers. So it's really been a cool thing to watch. We kind of stumbled into this, that basically there's a lack of mentoring in law. And there are state bars in the US. Like, people have tried to do this before, but really what we figured out is that video conferencing like this, Teams, Zoom, changes the mentoring world and makes it way easier for a practicing attorney to take 30 minutes and just show up on a Zoom, talk to a law student, and then, follow up as necessary. So that's kind of the background on the Legal Mentor Network, and it's definitely something people should look into.
Yes, and I think it's definitely a lot a lot more helpful for people who don't really have anyone in their family that are lawyers or didn't grow up knowing anyone that are lawyers. Like, it's just helpful being able to connect with lawyers and have them mentor you. So yeah, it's definitely really helpful, and thank you for creating that. So you've also written a book called The Jobless Lawyer's Handbook, and what can readers gain from reading this book? Why did you make it, and what can people benefit from reading it?
Yeah, so I wrote it because my wife had heard me do so many Zoom meetings with law students that she was like, you say a lot of the same things. You should probably just write this down in a book. And of course, at the time, I was like, great, just what I need, something else to do. But it was COVID. And so actually, while my wife and kids were playing The Legend of Zelda every night until they beat it, I wrote the book. And so I didn't write this book to make money. I gave it away for free on LinkedIn at least twice in my LinkedIn post. So you can go in my LinkedIn posts and find it and download it and print it out. Or if you want, you can go buy a copy on Amazon. I forget what it's like, $8 or $10 or something. It's a short read. There's a lot of detailed information in there about like which states in the US have the worst law schools, what kind of emails work to get people to respond to meeting, like spam emails. There's a formula in the US where you could put in your class rank and what law school you go to and get a pretty good idea of whether you're going to be able to get a firm job. So there's a lot of useful things. I basically spent hundreds of hours of my time trying to make it easier for people to get jobs. So, and then gave it away for free. So, So you should use it. I'll tell you, it's gotten great reviews. It sounds just like me talking, except I'm not cussing as much now as I do in the book. And the most common thing I get from people who read the book is, I wish I'd read this earlier. So if you think you're too busy, which is often what I get, law students are like, I'm so busy, I got to study for class. And I'm like, do you realize that you spent 20,000 hours in classes from what we would call kindergarten in the US? So when you're 5 years old, you start school, up through law school. You spend 20,000 hours in class to get a job, and very few people spend 100 hours trying to get the job. So you got to get your priorities straight. I think when you're on the job search, that it should be your top 5 things you're doing. And
Yeah.
it's not like do 30 minutes a day. This is just keep doing stuff, meet with people, talk to people, spam people, repeat, apply to jobs online, etc., etc. So it really is a ready, fire, aim strategy.
Yes, and getting like a job is a full-time job in itself, but if you treat it like that, you will definitely get results. So anyone who wants to
Exactly.
read the book, you should definitely get that book. Um, because the name of the podcast is Partnership Track, I want to like know more about the process of you becoming an equity partner at the firm you became an equity partner at. So what was the partnership process like? Is it that did you do like an interview and then you became a partner? What is the process for becoming a partner?
Yeah, so the process is slightly different at different firms. For example, at one firm I've been at, they really cared about what your likelihood is of bringing in work in order to make you partner. Another firm didn't care about that at all. They only want to know that you're going to be able to keep yourself busy inside the firm billing hours. And so there's not a cookie cutter response. What I can tell you, though, is that this is a business. And it turns out if you get hired by people to be the lawyer, you're going to make partner. So keep that in mind. One of the biggest mistakes I made and I see constantly in big firms is associates come in and they're like, shit, I have to bill whatever, 2,000 hours. And they bill their 2,000 hours and they do great work. And they do that for 7, 8 years. And they never talk to anyone except the partners at the firm or the clients that they're interacting with. Well, they just missed 10 years of relationship building for clients. And that's how you get clients. It's all about relationships and trust. That's it. It's not about how good your brief is. It's not about, I mean, obviously you have to be a competent lawyer that provides good legal advice and service and be responsive and all that stuff. But there's lots of lawyers who do that and do that well, but they often don't talk to anyone. And so they don't have relationships with people who could hire them because they haven't talked to anybody in 7, 8 years. And what people miss is that when you're a third year associate, a fourth year associate, a second year associate, of course, you're not the person who's going to get hired. But what happens is the relationships you have with other second years, third years, fourth years, the relationships you have in the community, everybody gets older and more senior. And it turns out some of your best clients are the ones that you just spent time with socially, the lawyers, while you were an associate. But the people who aren't doing that, who aren't being social, who aren't making a concerted effort to make relationships literally with anyone, lawyers, right? Lawyers are business people. Those people will often get to sixth year, seventh year associate, and then the firm will say, we need you to show that you can build a book of business, go get work. And then they turn around and they think that means going to a couple conferences. And then they're like, this didn't work. I don't know what I'm doing. And what the problem is they missed 6 to 8 years of relationship building that they could have done. Now, of course, you're busy and you got to build 2,000 hours and blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, just remember that your relationships with lawyers, young lawyers, older lawyers, other people, and how they think about you and whether they trust you and actually, think you're a good human is like way more important than how good your brief is by the time you're in eighth year. So, and it's hard because, at least in the US, the law schools don't tell you any of this. The law schools focus solely on making you the best associate you could be at a big law firm, the best writer. You have to be the number one legal mind in your law school to get a job. And that's kind of how the whole system is structured. But then you get out in the real world, and it turns out that 90% of clients aren't going to read your brief before they hire you. They're not going to have any idea. I mean, of course, you got to have a good name in general and blah blah blah, but it's so much more about relationships and people than it is about the quality of legal work. And that's the thing that people miss as young associates. And again, I'm not saying a third year associate, you need to go hang out with a bunch of general counsels. Obviously, you should if you can make relationships. But the other third year associates or fourth year associates at other firms or your firm, like, everybody gets older, they go to different places. And so, one of my first clients ever, I was a senior associate at Foley, and it was a former colleague of mine from a prior law firm when we were associates together, and he was now in house. And of course, he called me because we're friends and I know him, and he knew I wasn't going to screw him over. And so that happened. And that's when I sort of learned that, oh, I never even thought of him as a lead, right? Or that I could get work. He was just a friend of mine that I'd known for a long time. And so that's what I mean. Like, the people who fail at becoming partners or at becoming successful partners are usually the ones who are introverted and just want to do legal work in their office and go home and never talk to anybody. And that, to be clear, there are places for those people as partners in law firms. It's just they're service partners usually. It's harder to make partner as a service partner, and it's usually going to pay you less over your whole career as a partner. But you still make really good money and have a good lifestyle, and there's nothing wrong with that. And there's lots of service partners who just hate being social or don't want to deal with it, and they just want to make a good salary and do their legal work, which again is fine. But that pathway is much harder to make partner. You have to really be an amazing lawyer and be able to distinguish yourself and attract work inside of a big law firm. So there's multiple paths, but the more relationships you have with the more people and the more you help people, the better your entire career will be. And so I tell people to spam people for jobs, but honestly, you should keep spamming people your whole life. You should try to have 3 to 4 Zoom meetings a week with new people every week, which
Yeah.
sounds like a lot, but is like an hour and a half to 2 hours of your time. So
Yes, thank you. That's really good advice, and definitely not something that we're taught in law school. What does your day-to-day look like as a partner? So, how much time is spent on like doing legal work, like negotiating contracts or drafting contracts, and how much time is spent on business development? How does that, like, how do you sort of balance that?
I spend as much time as I can on business development, but obviously my first obligation is always to my clients and making sure they're getting what they need, making sure their cases are being handled. I'm basically a project manager at this point. I'm, handling a bunch of little big litigations. I'm usually the one that has to show up in court. I'm the filter to make sure the briefs and everything are well written and good. But it's a lot of project management because these cases are so much, discovery and motions and blah, blah, blah. They can be a lot of work. And obviously clients don't want to pay me my rate to do a lot of that. So it becomes a lot of project management, and, basically filtering things. The way law firms work generally is the more senior you get, the more you get to pick the type of legal work that you do. And so when you're a partner and you're managing the case, I can do whatever part of the case I want as long as it would make sense for the client. But if I'm like, I don't want to fight this discovery motion, I can have an associate write that. I obviously have to review it, or a partner who's working with me on the case would have to review it. But the point is, now I'm focused entirely on business development other than maintaining my existing client work. And so I'm actually in a position where I don't want to bill 2,000 hours a year because then I'm not doing any business development. And I have learned that I will make more money. And actually, most lawyers will make more money spending an hour doing business development than spending an hour billing a client at a high rate. It's really hard for people to understand that and to see that and to believe that because you'll spend an hour, nothing will happen. But it's cumulative. And if you spend 10 hours a week on business development, what do you think's going to happen? Something's going to work eventually. And then you're going to have a client or two. And the legal sphere is kind of strange because you only really need a couple clients and you can make partner. A lot of these companies have so much outside legal spend that, one, two, three big clients, and you're a partner at an AmLaw 100 firm. So there's not a one path fits all. There's a lot of partners, even equity partners, who focus more on billing time. But my view, and certainly my business development coach's view, is I should be spending time doing things like this, meeting people, getting my name out there, talking to people, giving value to people for nothing. And then it all comes around.
Yeah, thank you for that. So you've built like multiple businesses, like alongside being an equity partner, you've also you initially built a legal marketing agency, a keyboard for lawyers, an index fund for Democrats, and now an AI company. I'm just curious as to how do you manage all of these things alongside being like an equity partner? Because they seem like, because obviously running a business and trying to grow a business is like it's a lot, and it's a lot of commitments, and then also being an equity partner at a law firm. So how do you sort of manage these priorities?
Project management. I mean, first of all of my startups that I'm involved in, I'm not an officer. I'm not working on day to day. I'm on the board, co-founded, helping along whenever I can. But no law firm part would let me go work two jobs. That wouldn't make sense. Um, but I got the entrepreneur bug early. The keyboard was not I mean, it took a lot of work to set it up, but it's basically sits in a warehouse, and if you order it, the warehouse ships it, and I don't do anything. So it is a keyboard that has a section symbol on it, though, and you can turn track changes on and off. And so that was the first one I did back when I was at Foley, and it got me the entrepreneur bug, and I just love the vibe of people in entrepreneurship in that space. But what it's really done for me, honestly, is give me a lot more connections, reasons to talk to investors and potential clients. And so I think it's ironic, and I've said this before, but I swear inventing that keyboard for lawyers has gotten me way more legal work and attention than any article I've ever written on
Wow.
anything. And I've written like I spent the first 10 years of my career writing op-eds and law review articles, basically trying to prove myself as a lawyer because I thought that's what I needed to do. I had to prove that I was the best. And then I've since realized that that's not the best way to market yourself. And you only need so many accolades before people will believe that you know what you're talking about. And that it really is a much more about interpersonal relationships and helping other people. Basically, it turns out if you help 100 people for free, 10 of them will come back and hire you as their lawyer when they have an oh shit or they need it. And so that's kind of the model that I've been following. The startups, the more recent ones, I'm an ideas guy. I come up with the ideas or help come up with the ideas and then have other founders who will do it full time, run with it. And then I just sort of am an advisor. But it's been a lot of fun. Uh, I love the startup space, but I have no interest in being the CEO of a keyboard company. I'm a partner at an AmLaw 100 firm, and I like being a partner at an AmLaw 100 firm. I like doing legal work, and I get paid pretty well to do it. And so uh, it's been fun, and that's why all the companies I'm involved with, except the keyboard, have some social impact behind them. So if I'm going to give my time to companies, I'm not just doing it for the money. I'm doing it because I think it might help make the world a better place.
Yes. And your latest venture, I would like to know more about that. So I think it's called Arbitrus the AI. What's that about? What
Yeah,
does it actually do?
this one is mind blowing to a lot of lawyers, including me. But basically, what we realized is that the US dispute resolution system is essentially a marketplace, right? If you have a dispute, you have two choices. You can go to US courts, either state or federal court, or you can go to AAA arbitration. And the problem is, both of those are really expensive alternatives, hundreds of thousands of dollars at a minimum to get through an arbitration, usually. So put that in the context of Arbitrus. And so what we have done is provided a private AI driven alternative to public courts and AAA arbitration. So if you're two parties, let's say you and I are signing a contract, and let's say the contract is only about 150 grand or 250 grand. Now, today, most people would put, if there's a dispute, we're going to do AAA arbitration. But you know what happens is, if there is a dispute, nobody wants to do AAA arbitration because it's going to cost more than the dispute is worth. It doesn't make any sense. And so what we have created is an alternative that costs 1/10 as much as AAA arbitration. And it is literally a private court system with an AI judge. A human will review the decision that's written, but won't change the law or the legal reasoning. We're just reviewing it to make sure that the tech worked, it didn't hallucinate, etc. And so we're my co-founders just published an article on SSRN, open sourcing how they built it, but it's I think could be game-changing technology. And the reason why I think it's a social good, a lot of people are going to look at it and say, "Oh God, they're coming for my jobs." And I get that response. And certainly some people could lose their jobs over this if it got big or have different jobs. But as I see it today, the US court systems, I think most people would agree, are not very efficient at dispute resolution. And AAA, which was invented 75 years ago in the US, which is arbitration, or 50 years, was meant to fix that and really hasn't. Litigation light, but it's still a few $100,000. Now, if your dispute is worth less than $75,000, you pay us a total of $1,250 to get through the process. So you can imagine now you still can have your own lawyers participate, but the actual system is each party files a brief, each party puts their evidence up, including depositions, if you want, video, testimony, cross-examination via video. And then there's a hearing where the AI asks you questions that it thinks are critical to the decision. And then within 3 days, you get a written decision. And then the one other thing I'll say about it is it's not just a dispute resolution tool because of the way it's built. What we're also doing is if you have a big litigation, if you're thinking about bringing a big litigation, you can run it through our system and get a probability of success and a report that basically tells you what your strongest arguments are. And so there's two use cases, but the main, I think, use case is vendor agreements, employee agreements that are not not executives, things like that. It just makes way more sense because if you put it in the contract as arbitrus.ai instead of AAA, now you know the cost is going to be less if there ever is a dispute. Both parties do. And so it's an interesting idea. Lawyers are very fired up about it. As you can imagine, we're basically created an AI judge, and people don't feel comfortable about that. And I fully understand that. But I also think people wildly underestimate how many decisions computers are making for them every day, all the time. If they look at their phone, computers are making decisions for you. And so this technology is really better for decision making rather than advocacy, which is a lot of what the AI tech is going for now is help lawyers draft briefs, which is fine, but turns out it's hard to sell lawyers a product to make their lives more efficient. I've been doing it with my keyboard for a long time. And a product that actually goes straight to the companies and makes their dispute resolution process much more efficient. It makes way more sense from both the business perspective and I think from the use of the tech perspective.
When I read about it, I thought it was really impressive, and it's definitely going to disrupt the legal industry. So yeah, thank you so much, Brian, for coming on the podcast and talking about your journey. I think it's really inspiring, and I think what you've done in terms of creating the Legal Mentor Network and just mentoring thousands of lawyers and helping them to connect with other lawyers as well is really kind of you. So thank you. Um,
Yeah, thanks for having me.
yeah, no worries. How can people connect with you?
They can always email me at my Husch Blackwell email, which is just Brian, Brian .potts at hushblackwell.com, or just go sign up at the Legal Mentor Network or follow me on LinkedIn. I've got like 35,000 followers now because I'm LinkedIn famous for being rejected. So
Yeah, you're now like a LinkedIn influencer. So, yeah, if anyone wants to follow Brian, I'll put it in the show notes as well. But thank you so much, Brian, and yeah, hope you have a great day.
yeah, thank you so much. Have a great day.